Hey everyone, welcome to Trailblazer Path podcast. I'm very excited to be interviewing Jazmine Booker. Welcome, Jazmine.
Hi, how's everybody? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I feel like you are a trailblazer, and I'm really excited to ask you some awesome questions. And we were just talking about we couldn't remember how we got connected. Well, we knew it was LinkedIn, but we're like, did someone
hmm
introduce us? And I think we just kind of found each other, and that's the beauty of LinkedIn.
Yeah, like it really is a great connecting platform and also a good networking situation. Like starting those conversations at least, and then building those relationships.
I feel like as a salesperson and just growing my network, it's completely changed the way I connect with people.
hmm
Before it was all about like cold calling and showing up, and it was like it's completely changed, and I just absolutely love what LinkedIn has created because I enjoy it more, like just connecting
What
with
and it
people.
feels a lot less intimidating for some
Yeah.
people, especially if you're trying to go into sales. So you can actually build that connection and talk about your product or your service, and people don't feel as intimidated by it.
Yeah, or like you're pushy, like cold calling, like, hey, I want to talk to you. Whereas
And you got to
LinkedIn,
do it right now. Like,
yeah,
no.
it provides like you can just share your thoughts, and if people see it, they're like, "Oh, this is interesting," and then you engage. It's so fun. But that's not even what we're talking about today. We're talking about you and like all the cool stuff you're doing. So, you have a podcast.
I
It's
do.
called Auto Talk with Jazz, which I love that name. And I just want to know what inspired you to start the podcast.
Yeah. It actually originally was called Downshift Offense. I don't remember exactly how I got that name, but originally I did it to help empower women in the field. I realized that I think at that time I had about 6, 7 years experience, and I could only count on one hand how many women I actually worked with. And that was scary. And that meant there was less women who were actually technicians that I knew. And so it was really about me trying to build a community where I knew I could go get women that I could like ask questions and be vulnerable with and understand like I'm not alone in this field. I have people who look like me who are doing stuff specifically in the service industry. And then eventually it actually expanded to bringing on people who knew what it meant to build a better organizational culture. Why do we need better shops? Why do we need better relationships between employees and employers and management? What does it mean to be a good leader in the automotive field and actually care about your employees instead of treating them like a number? And so it kind of expanded into that after having those women on there.
Oh, I love that. Hearing that it resonates because I went through a change in name of podcast, and it's terrifying to go through a
Oh,
name
yeah.
change because you build such a awareness, a brand, but it comes to a point where, and I'm sure you felt this way, is like the name and what I originally thought isn't what I'm actually doing. And and it just
hmm
like it's okay to shift. Like,
What, and
yeah.
it also was like people can remember downshift offense and how I spelt it was different.
Okay.
So
That's
the
good.
rebranding was not only just helpful because Auto Talk with Jazz people can remember. It's almost like a statement. You're doing Auto Talk with Jazz. But downshift offense, like people didn't know it was me. People can remember the name. They would be like, hey, you have a great podcast, but what's the name? And so I was losing people because they couldn't find me versus now they can find me.
Absolutely. Your name is there.
Yeah, literally.
And I was talking to someone about this recently because it's podcasting is like the new content for companies, the new content for branding, but it's our source as like anyone that's trying to grow or learn. It's our resource to learn. And
Yes.
I was just listening to one the other day that I was like, I want to connect with that person. And I
hmm
feel like it opens our mind to so many people that you're like, oh my gosh, that person's awesome. Like, and then you reach out to them, you find them on LinkedIn, you're like, hey, I listened to you. Can we
It's
connect?
like a new business card.
It is,
Like it's
yeah.
truly a we've now gotten into the new age where it's like people don't give business cards. Like if you want to go into a podcast, you reach out to the podcast. And now you've built that connection and you get to learn about industries you've never thought of. You get to be a part of projects that you never thought you would be a part of. You get to ask questions and get those answers a lot easier than what we were able to do like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
So it's like incredible of what podcasting can do if you do it correctly. There's a lot of
Absolutely.
work that goes into it that
Yeah,
people don't
I have
realize.
questions about that too, but I had thoughts on like just the right way or the way to do it. And I always struggle with that because there are so many out there and they all have their own unique way. So I feel like there's a fine line of feeling like you're not doing it right, but also feeling you are because you are you and the people that you need to be around are going to be they're going to find you is the way
Right.
I look at it. I try not to stress about like all the little like because I personally and I think you too are not podcasting to make money or I guess interview celebrities. I mean, it might be kind of fun, but I don't know. I've interviewed some really cool people and that I really look up to, and I was like terrified.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've brought a couple of people on where I was like, there's no way like you actually wanted to come on here. But at the same
But they
time,
did.
it was like they did and they
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah.
There are some people who reached out to me. I'm like, didn't even know you listened. I had a whole school reach out to me and I was like, oh, oh, okay. Like, let's, sure. Like, I'll talk about the school. And it was an all girls school
Oh,
that had their own automotive school or training for the girls. And like, they wanted shout outs. This teacher wanted me to do shout outs for the school. And it was like
wow.
crazy.
Okay, now where was the school or where is the school? And like that's just so cool.
It's been years, unfortunately.
Oh,
Yeah, no, it's been some years, and I've been trying to remember
I guess I didn't realize you
who
have
it
been
was.
podcasting that long. That's insane.
Yeah, like I think they had reached out to me like maybe 2 months into me starting, and this was 4 years ago.
4 years. Okay, so
So
4 years into podcasting.
no, not even 4 years. 3 months into podcasting. 4 years
Oh,
ago.
4 years.
Yeah,
Okay, got it. No, but
yeah,
overall, you've been podcasting for four
for
years.
4 years. Yeah.
So let's talk about the just the process of be doing your own podcast. Because I've been fortunate to have a lot of help. I think a lot of people that are starting, that's the most intimidating thing is like editing and branding and marketing, all that stuff. So walk me through just kind of how you organize all of that.
Now I get it into I think three, maybe four different softwares. So I actually partnered with a company called PodPro, and they helped me in the actual system itself. You can actually outline the whole episode, whatever you're going to say, whatever questions you're going to do. I can run it through and I can add how long are we supposed to talk. If it's 30 minutes, we break it down into 30 minutes and it keeps track of it as you're recording. So now you know where you're supposed to be at, how long every section is supposed to be, and it just pushes you through. And then by the time you finish recording, I then turn it into editing. Weirdly enough, editing used to take me, I think, about 4 or 5 hours because I also was doing like an hour and a half long episodes and trying to get them down to 45 minutes.
And a
Eventually,
lot at trial and error.
yeah, that's the reason why I've been doing it for 4 years and can condense it down. So now 30 minutes, we're good. Usually it's the questions that we have. And then by that point, I actually put it into either an AI tool where it helps me with the content, breaking it down and transcribing it, or I just go in and I write my own stuff. And then I am able to disperse it manually into social media. Or I could use Canva, which some people use that.
Yeah. Now, after asking that question, when you started it, AI really wasn't that
Wasn't it?
huge.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so it's come a long way in really helping us podcasters produce and help keep the content going because you can just see when you go on social media, it's just
It's
increased
there.
so much. Yes.
And a lot of, I know a lot of people have the backlash of it. And I'm actually also in video production, which is what we kind of talked about. And so it's a huge fear in video production of like, it's going to take over that industry. It's going to take over film and video production. So just my little soapbox of it is it's a tool. So it helps with time management for me. Podcasting, whenever you're doing it by yourself, usually is going to take you anywhere from 10 to 20 hours. Give or take at least a month, you're going to spend 10 to 20 hours if you don't know what you're doing. If you can get it by yourself down to 10 to 20 hours, you can now bring that even more down to maybe 10 hours a month. But you have to know what to do. And unfortunately, you also have to spend the money to do it.
Yeah.
So it's either you spend more money and less time or more time and less money.
Yeah. I get what you mean.
So unfortunately, some people don't have the resources and they have to do it themselves. But, that's the reason why I also do the consulting end of it, where I do go and I help people understand hey, this is what you can do. And you don't have to take 4 years to learn it like I did.
Yeah.
Here's my 4 years in 30 minutes.
And I want to talk about that because becoming like a freelancer and just starting your own, I don't even, it's not, I guess it's kind of like a side hustle, right? It always starts as a
Yeah.
side hustle and then
Oh,
you,
yeah.
figure it out. But what I'm most curious about is that when just identifying that you went through all those trial and errors for the 4 years, and then you're able to compile that into an organized way and help other people. So how has that been? And I feel like you even learn even more by doing that too, because you're like
Oh,
also
yeah.
like, yeah. So talk about that.
So whenever you then go onto the receiving end of your teaching people, you never stop learning. I think a lot of people mistake it for, oh, you believe you know everything. Absolutely not. There are things that worked for me that other people it may not work for. And so you start learning, okay, for this industry, maybe this social media platform works. Like automotive, LinkedIn works for us because it's a business type
Yeah.
situation. Like for me, I was able to start a newsletter and in 3 months it grew to 500 subscribers. But for a beauty situation, maybe that may not be the case because that's a beauty line. So then you might have to do Instagram, which is very much so beauty, or you can do Facebook. You have to figure out what story you're going to tell, who's your audience, how old your audience is, and where they're at. And that could take at least a good 2 or 3 months of trial and error. And you have to be willing to bump your head a little bit and then find them. Because who I thought my audience was 4 years ago, I found out was not my audience. Like it changed over the years. And so you do have to change with you have to change with your brand.
Yeah. I think that with podcasts, we always have like this original idea. And then as we get going, it
It goes
just,
left and right. Like,
yeah. And I think that's normal. Like everyone I talk to that podcast, it's like, I think it's okay to shift and change. And I
yes.
mean, I know some people that do like seasons, like they
Hmm.
have blocks of episodes that's just focused on the seasons and things. I'd say since we both went through like a name change, what advice would you give? And I think I might have some advice too, but like what advice would you give for someone who's like, they have this idea, they want to start a podcast, but they're like, I don't even know what to call it. What if I call it the wrong name? Like,
You
it's
can
just,
always change your name. Actually, the person who gave me the best advice, just quick story,
yeah.
my when I first started podcasting, it actually took me a year before I even did my first episode. So technically I've been trying to do this for 5 years, but I've been professionally doing it for 4. And the person who was pushed me out of the nest, so to speak, was my stepmom. She was like, "You're never going to not know what you can do and what you shouldn't do until you do it. You just have to bump your head sometimes."
Mhm.
And so bumping my head was downshift offense. People loved it. Again, they loved the what it stood for. They loved hearing it. Actually, I think I was doing hour and a half. If you listen to the podcast from before to now, horrible audio.
I
I
know.
sound monotone.
Same with mine.
There's so many ums and likes. I don't know what I'm talking about, the whole 9 hours, and people were still listening.
Yeah.
So usually, if you do have to go through a rebrand, be okay with that. Actually, one of my guests that I have, they had to go through a rebrand with a shop. So if they can go through a rebrand with a full automotive shop, like getting rid of their employees, the whole 9 yards, if they can do that, then just restarting your podcast is okay. Restarting your social media is okay. Restarting your business is okay. Doesn't mean you failed. It just means that didn't work.
Well, and I don't even think it didn't work because you're
Well, it
sharing,
worked, yeah.
yeah, people were listening. You just grow and learn, and you're like, I need to shift a little bit.
Yeah.
And my fear was like, I still wanted to be identified as the parts girl. Like that's what I've always focused on and that's what I know in the industry. But my name of my podcast was narrowing my audience because what we were actually even talking about was what I've named it now as Trailblaze. Like people in the industry and any industry really that are trailblazing a path and just doing awesome things. That's what I like to talk about.
Right.
On top of all the parts stuff, but like you gotta
Well,
separate
and
the
that's the
two.
thing is like you were able to navigate that and you realize, okay, this is not the name for me, but this is because this is what I do. This is what we're talking about. And I think a lot of people are scared because once they grow out of that mindset, it's like, but I have to hold on to it. It's like, if you're growing out of that mindset, it's for a reason. So
Yeah.
just go ahead and do it.
Go, yeah, that's for a
And you
reason.
can either always go back to it and you just have to keep pushing it. There's always going to be fears of it because I always get scared because I hate change sometimes. And there's other times where I'm like, yes, we're going to do something different. And like that initial jump into it is very scary. The first
Absolutely.
time I rebranded was very scary.
You're like, what are people gonna say? But I do like how you said you, for about a year, you had like kind of interviews stacked up, which I don't know if I would recommend waiting that long because then it's
Oh,
like
no.
but I do know someone that she's recording videos and she has a great name and she's not really like calling it a podcast and I'm just like, you should stack up some stuff and then like roll it out. You need a hub to host all this great information and
Right.
just have it there. Don't even stress on it being this
Well,
great podcast.
I tell people all the time. Well, and even that year before, I didn't have anything recorded. At one point, I wasn't doing interviews. I was
Okay.
actually terrified of interviewing people because I don't like, I know it seems like it, but I don't like talking to people all the time. I'm very introverted. I'm very like to myself. I want to be in the corner and just like, I'll do all the background work. I don't always like to be in front of people.
Yeah.
So once I got used to, like I tell people, my first episode literally was like, "Hi, thank you for tuning in to Downshift Offense." And like that would, and I did it for an hour,
Yeah.
and then now I'm like, "Hey guys, like, what's
So
going on?"
you weren't even interviewing people. You were like for an hour just talking because that to me is like my biggest fear is like talking. Not even I mean for an hour, but like yeah, that's just
No, like I literally was just doing topics, and then people were like, "I want to come on your podcast," and then
that's
I
cool.
started interviewing people. But then, like going back to your friend, like I would always give the advice like at least have a month's worth out of stuff that you can go ahead and post so that way you're at least a month ahead because if you keep trying to keep up with like weekly stuff it gets overwhelming and then you start
Absolutely.
and stop and you start and stop and then if you're paying for it and you're doing everything out of pocket or like out of your own pocket you technically get to a point where you just don't want to do it anymore because it's so stressful. You love doing it, but it's so stressful.
Yeah, and there's not there, well, and we could kind of talk about this too. There's not a direct way to really track ROI, and like, unless you're actually getting this crazy sponsorship or doing commercials with like people that want to have, because there's like, I listen to Jay Shetty, and he has like massive sponsorships and like
Right.
millions of people. Like, he's making money off that podcast, but he does a great job. But
Well,
like,
and it takes money to make money, and it also takes the right connections to get the money, to make the money, and to get out there. Because a lot of those connections are people that they've worked with before. A lot of the people who start podcasts now who are up there sometimes, there are some people who grew their podcast,
or some
obviously.
people pay to be on people's podcasts too. Like there's that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
there's so many different revenues that people don't understand that they could do with podcasting. Some people are okay with it. I worked with one person. They did not like asking for money. So it was like they had great ideas and actually could get to a point where they could get revenue. They just didn't want to because they were scared of, well, I need to charge for this, but I don't want to. And sometimes you do get in your own way in that certain sense.
Yeah, I think that is, and there, I think there's a balance when you
Hmm.
know, are you podcasting for a company or are you podcasting for yourself? Because
Self.
that is one struggle I personally, I mean, I podcast, I'm sponsored by the company I work for, and I'm producing content for the company. So it's like, you know, I did try sponsorships for a little bit and you know, I don't know if you've experienced it, but like with sponsorships, you feel like you have to be held to a higher standard and it's way more stressful. And I feel like too, like you have to ask yourself when you're starting the podcast, do you want to do that or do you just want to do just content creation? Because I think it's okay, right? To just do one or the other. You don't have to do it to make money.
You don't have to do it to make money. I think a lot of people see it as a money maker and then get disappointed whenever they don't make money. So I think it usually people see it as the opposite. Oh, this is a fast way to make money. And it's not. It's
No.
absolutely not. And it's a lot of work before anybody wants, like, you cannot be in that mindset when you come into podcasting. It is a business. You have to market it. You have to do pre-production. You have to manage it. You have to do social media. You have to do this. You have to do that. Like, there's so many steps before you get to the end result of a podcast that most people don't realize. And that's where a lot of people stop because they're like, oh, well, you may not have to spend all this money in order to be a podcaster because you have to spend money to make that money and be able to have that equipment, have those resources, have whatever. So I tell people all the time, just understand if you're not going to use it for money, try to help use it as a tool to help guide you to different clients. Like I don't get
Yes.
money from the podcast, but because I have the podcast, most people see me as not only a podcaster, but a subject matter expert. So they come to me and they ask the questions of like, hey, can you help me put my podcast together? And then that's what they pay me for is you come in, you help me put in the strategies in place, how much help me with the budget, and then help me figure the first steps out. And then if you want me to, I can come and help you with growth.
Yeah, no, and I think that I don't know about you, but like I feel like every company should have its own podcast.
Even if
Whether,
it's just internal,
yeah,
you should have a podcast
yeah,
because it's a step of bringing it's
it's a
building a
part of marketing.
community. It's a part of marketing, but it's easy to build a community within. I'm very big on making your employees feel like they're heard. Podcasts are very good with allowing people to have their voice heard. That's the point of the reason why I started Auto Talk with Jazz, to allow women to feel like they were heard going through some of the issues of the industry
Yeah.
that were getting over, that was just getting pushed off into the space and into the
It
depth of
happens.
the abyss.
And it happens a lot. So it's like we need more people like you and it's just anyone just creating those spaces for people to be heard. And yeah, I feel like anyone listening is going to get so much from just like if they're curious about podcasting, hopefully they're coming up with something. But to wrap
Yeah.
up, what is like your top two things that you would tell someone who's like has an idea about it, but they're not sure where to start?
Be okay with failure. Be okay with starting over. Be okay with understanding you don't know everything when you start off. your first time is not going to be perfect. Do not expect it to be perfect. Like, you're starting off from ground zero. There's nowhere else to go but up.
Yeah.
And when you start over, you're starting over from experience. So don't ever look at it as, okay, this didn't work, I'm a failure. Look at it as, this didn't work. Now I have the opportunity to do it a different way again.
Keep going and
Just keep going.
Yeah. No, that's some good advice, because I feel the same. Like, when it was, I think it's been about 4 years now. It's like, I just was like, I have this idea, I'm going to do it, and I don't even care. And I mean, I cared, but I'm like, I'm just going to learn and go, because that's just
go
my
figure it out.
personality. Yeah, that's just my personality. So,
Yeah.
but not
I hit my
like
head
that.
all the time. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and also get out of the planning stage.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah.
That's the other big piece of advice. Get out of your planning stage. Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. You can figure it out later.
Exactly. You'll
You'll
figuring
plan
it
it.
out, actually.
Yeah, you'll plan it later. Just do it.
That's perfect advice. Okay, so how can everyone find you? We'll have the links in the description and all that good stuff, but I'm sure they can find you on LinkedIn, your full name, and then your podcast is on all the major platforms, all that good stuff. So, yeah, is there
Yes.
any closing things you want to say before we say goodbye?
Yeah, if you want to find my podcast is, like I said, Auto Talk with Jazz. It usually has its own platform across everything. If you want to work with me as far as consulting is concerned, then just follow me on J Booker Productions, and that's where I actually do all of my consulting and social media management, all of that.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll have that link too below if anyone
Absolutely.
wants to reach out. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining me on the Trailblaze Your Path podcast. I hope you're leaving us inspired. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It really helps. Follow me on social media, check out our YouTube channel for more content, and remember, new episodes drop every other Friday. Keep blazing your own trail, and I'll catch up with you next time.